it's always nice to hear your voice, your meditations in our presence. Those of you that don't know John, longtime pastor at First United Methodist, and now is kind of the on-retainer preacher for St. Matthew's. I'm glad to have him with us again. So, John, it's all you, sir.
Thank you. Be seated. I'm old enough to remember Art Linkletter hosting a show called Kids Say the Darndest Things. As I said at dairy service, I'm also old enough to remember when they invented fire and the wheel. I would amend that because my experience has been not only do kids say the darndest things, they ask the darndest things. And they keep asking them. I was working at church in San Antonio. We had a summer children's program, and somebody figured out that it would be a wonderful idea for us to take these children to the Lone Star Hall of Horns, where they had all the taxidermy animals there for the kids to see. And we were walking through, being led by this guy, who made the mistake of stopping at this one particular place, where he said to the gathered assembly, "Here we have a specimen of the rare white leopard." A small child raised his hand. The guy made the mistake of acknowledging the child. A question, and the child said, "Yes, sir. If it's rare, why did they kill it?" There was an amazing silence that settled on the room, except for the suppressed giggles of the sponsors who were in the back, grateful that they were not in the place of the guy. It can be very difficult to explain things to a child. They just don't accept the first answer. It's particularly hard to explain things to them like faith. But everyone ought to have to explain their faith to a child. It's good for the child because they get to hear what an elder thinks is important to them. It's good for the elder because the elder has to become much more clear about what it is that they believe, because children will push you long past your comfort zone. They do not accept rationalization. They do not accept nuance. They just want answers. And you know that no matter what you tell them, that horrible question is coming. Why? And then you'll answer, why? Barbara Brown Taylor has been recognized time and time again as one of America's great preachers, and she is entitled to that not only because of her presentation skills, but because of her incredibly clear thinking. In one of her sermons, she talks about the fact that she's had the experience of raising children, and so now she is already in preparation for that day when her then 7-year-old granddaughter was going to ask her a question. And she said she was about ready. One day when Madeline asked me outright whether prayer really works, I'm going to say, "Oh, sweetie, of course it does. It keeps our hearts chasing after God's heart. It's how we bother God, and it's how God bothers us back. There's nothing that works any better than that." To me, that's a wonderful answer for a child. Come to think of it, it's not a bad answer for an adult. Not a bad answer for me, assuming that I'm an adult. In the first verse of Luke 18, Jesus says, "Pray and do not lose heart." And then he launches into a parable. It's a parable about a powerless widow. And by the way, in that day and time, to say powerless widow is redundant. Widows were totally powerless. No resources, no authority, no power, powerless. In this parable, the powerless widow continually confronts the judge until he finally gives her her due. Now, this is what it's called a how much more parable. In other words, if the crooked judge can be made to respond, how much more will a loving God respond to God's children? But I want to go back to the start. You always need, when you're looking at a parable, you always need to know what is the question that the parable is asking. It doesn't matter what the answer is if you don't know what the question is. And the question is here, pray and do not lose heart. That's what he's teaching. How do you pray and not lose heart? I believe we pray not just to not lose heart. I believe we pray to gain heart. To get to the heart of things. To heal our heart. To make sure our heart's in the right place. Which is a kind of an interesting thought when you think about it. I mean, how could your heart not be in the right place? But of course, it's not a question of physical location. It's a question of spiritual centeredness. And several of the Gospels remind us where your treasure is, there will your heart, thank you, will be also. Glad to see you're still awake so far. The prophet Jeremiah writes, "I will put my law in their hearts." How do we get to the heart that Jeremiah promises? This heart with a new covenant written upon it. God's law central to it. A heart that knows God. How do we do that? Well, one way is to pray. Back to Barbara Brown Taylor. Prayer keeps our hearts chasing after God's heart. It is how we bother God, and it's how God bothers us back. Maybe we need to re-examine our praying. Too often we pause for a moment to present our grocery list to God. Dear God, I need yada, 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 yada. Thank you very much. Amen. I once heard a woman say that she prayed for a parking spot near the front door of the mall. Given the heat we had last summer, I can understand the prayer. But I'm afraid that falls into the bother God category. How often do we chase after God's heart? How often do we give God time and space to bother us back? You see, we all live out of an internalized faith. And that faith shapes all that we do, all that we are. And Christians believe that we do that best when at the center of things is God, when God is in our heart, as we say. How does one get in touch with that? That in-touchness comes with prayer. And that can be time spent in silence or with music or out of doors with no agenda whatsoever, simply the beauty of God's creation. Or maybe it's time spent reading the works of others who are striving to reach out to touch the face of God. And by reading their works, our search is enhanced and enabled. The great thing about parables is that each of us have our own take on what they mean. We hear the question, we hear the story, and then we decide how that story applies to our lives. Here's my take. We are afraid, and we will receive. But we will not necessarily receive what we want. We will necessarily receive what we need. We do not lose heart. In fact, we gain a new heart. A heart filled with a greater, deeper awareness of God. An awareness that is written on our hearts. And because it is in our hearts, it shapes all that we are. It is a heart that is more loving. It is a heart that is more forgiving. It is a heart that is more generous. Now be warned. Be warned. With some of this will come new awarenesses. And some of those awarenesses will be challenging to us. It may make us rethink what we have thought before. It may make us rethink what we have done before. It may make us reevaluate what we are doing right now. Sometimes it is uncomfortable to have the heart aligned with the heart of God. But we need to be willing to risk that. Because this is about our heart. And this is about our God. Alison Krauss in Union Station recorded a song several years ago entitled Living Prayer. There is a chorus that, being a chorus, of course, is repeated several times. That's why they call them choruses, I suppose. And these are the words of the chorus. In your love I find release, a haven from my unbelief. Take my life and let me be a living prayer, my God, to thee. That's it. That's the goal. To become a living prayer. That's why we pray. That's what we pray for. That's what we pray to become. That's why we father God. That's why we let God father us. That's why our heart chases after God's heart. And so we pray. We pray and we do not lose heart. Because in those best moments, we are drawing our heart nearer to the heart of God. And friends, it ain't bad. In the name of the Father, and the Son,